for anybody who doesn't or isn't totally aware of Carol's background, I will give a short introduction and then we'll invite you up to have a chat. So, first and foremost, Carol is the CEO of CPA Ontario. She's the leader of our profession. And she started at PwC. She made it to senior manager there before making the leap over to industry, and she started at Plan Canada as the controller. She very quickly rose to president at that organization before moving over to the Mount Sinai Foundation, also as president. Very shortly after that, she was tapped to become the CEO of the Toronto Regional Board of Trade, where she stayed until her current role as CEO of CPA Ontario. Carol has been the director of so many organizations that I'm not even going to begin to list them all here, and her list of awards is really just as staggering. So I will just mention she was listed as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women in 2010, which is really cool. And probably the most important role she has is as mother to two wonderful children, Robin and Sarah. So with that, if we could get just a quick round of applause and have Carol come up here and join me. Great to have you, yeah.
Yeah, whoops, there we go.
There
Thanks.
we go, all
Great
right.
to be here. I want to see Alan wear that t-shirt to the next board meeting.
Please.
Perhaps we could get one for all of council, Michael.
That would be awesome. We've got them all stacked in the office. Will, you're on it. All right.
He's on it.
So normally we actually start by going kind of like early in people's careers, but I just thought given this particularly special event that we would start with just your thoughts on the CPA. What does being a CPA mean to you? How do you see it as a foundation for moving in different directions? And yeah, like as the leader, what do you take away from this designation?
Great. Well, let me just first say, excited to be here tonight. And I do hope we get an opportunity. I really, really want to hear from you guys what's important to you. I'll talk a little bit about where we're going, but importantly, I want to hear from you what's on your mind, whether it's relative to the profession and some of the challenges, or relative to what we're doing at CPA Ontario and what we could do better. So love to hear that. But so listen, the CPA for me, probably like it is for most people, is it's deeply personal. You know, the decision to become a CPA was one that I guess in some ways I fell into it a bit, and then it was more of a conscious decision. But it feels like it's a big part of who I am as an individual, personally, professionally, and how I take my decisions in life. As a mother, as a business leader, as a CEO, I think it's woven into everything that I do. So for me, it's a personal part. It's not just a designation behind my name that garners me opportunities in the professional world. In terms of where we are right now as a profession, I literally actually just came back from New York a couple hours ago for a women's forum in New York that was really looking at women leaders and opportunities to advance them in terms of being on corporate boards. And we have a long way to go, I will say globally, in the US and in Canada, and I won't get into the details of it. But you know, what was interesting there was a couple of individuals, you know, these are big brand name Fortune 500 CEOs, and I think with a similar message around the digital disruption that's in front of us, and more particularly, they talk a lot about the complex disruption-driven economy that we live in, and that isn't going to change anytime soon. And so if that's now become the new normal, if you want to call it, then I think for the profession as a whole, we are so well equipped in terms of the skills that you garner as a CPA to be able to help individuals navigate through that as business leaders, not as accountants, but as business leaders, to look at what's that disruption that's in front of me, what don't I know about, and how can you help me navigate that as a business? So I think that's really the essence of what the CPA is.
Great, yeah, and you know, I think that this is actually something that threads a needle through a bunch of the other events that we had for anybody that were present at those ones, because what you see are very different people who have had very successful careers in very different directions, all starting with the CPA. So it's kind of this tool that can be used in a lot of different ways. So we'll definitely get more time near the end to talk about kind of plans for the future on this, so thank you for that. And now we'll jump back into your life a little bit and hear a little bit about that, because so you started, when you left PwC, you became the controller of Plan Canada, and 4 years later, you were the president. So please explain to us how you make that leap in 4 years, because that's amazing.
I don't know. Look, I will first say, I mean, I love my time at PwC. It was PW at the time. No offense to all those in public accounting in the room, or to my bosses sitting there all in the front row. But, we talked a bit about that. I knew I never wanted to be a partner in a public accounting firm. That was never really my goal, because I didn't want to be looking at other people's decisions, and I wanted to be in that driver's seat. What I did love about it was that it was just a great learning curve, and it was the right foundation to look at a whole bunch of different businesses and business models. But I did step into to what's now Plan. It was at the time called Foster Parents Plan. Many of you would probably know the organization. It does international development work around the world. And it happened to be at a time in my life when I was expecting my now daughter, who is 27, so my daughter Sarah. So for the women in the room, it was the typical kind of decision, and I thought I would step into a role and take all the great skills that I had as a CPA and apply them to an organization that I believed in very deeply. And in some ways, I thought it was a little bit of a step aside and slow down for a while, which obviously it wasn't. But I got in there, and I went into the typical financial controller role, a lot of financial reporting, a lot of budgeting, a lot of planning, a lot of the things that we're known to do as accountants that we want people to think we don't do all the time. And I will say, for me, what it was about is that the decision was, as most of my decisions are, driven as a head and a heart decision. I went in, the head part of it was, I could take what I'd learned, I could apply it. The heart part was, it was an organization that I believed passionately in terms of the work. But, there you are in the finance. You have to do, I think, doing what you do really well is kind of table stakes. So if you want to talk about how do you move that quickly in your career, it's about taking the ownership and taking the responsibility and being accountable for your decisions. And doing it with an integrity in terms of, what I mean by integrity is that you do what you say you're going to do in the way you're going to do it in the time that you're going to do it, and that's how you build your integrity over time. So in that case, I went in, I did a lot. It's a small organization. You get a chance to really get out there and put your arms around a lot of different things, and so various opportunities started to present themselves. And if they didn't, I put my hand up and found ways to be involved in opportunities that were there. And one thing led to another in terms of an opportunity to work worldwide on some massive projects, redesigning worldwide financial systems. That was pretty crazy. My kids were, by then I'd had my second child, my kids were very young, and I was literally traveling the world trying to help this organization in 65 countries redesign its worldwide financial systems, because I believed passionately in what it was trying to do. So one thing led to another. Well,
and I think when we spoke, you described yourself as kind of a millennial, back when being a millennial wasn't cool. So I guess what that means to me is always just, pushing. I mean, I guess in the millennial sense, it's whether you should or shouldn't, but pushing towards those next opportunities, and I guess in your case, actually being able to deliver on the previous ones to give you that ownership to go the next step.
Yes, look. Bottom line is, you have to own it. You have to be accountable for your decisions. You have to deliver on a. I think if you want to get ahead, delivery on a day-to-day basis is just table stakes. But it is the opportunities that you put your hand up for when there's a gap, when there's uncertainty, when there's ambiguity. Jump into it. Some people shy away from it. I actually, go towards that. And that's, for me, proven to be always very opportunistic. I think even to, maybe it was Jean's comment around, or others, step in where you're not qualified to do it, and you'll find your way. You'll trip and fall a few times, but eventually you'll find your way.
Yeah, well, it's something that we certainly know at Luminari quite personally about, taking those opportunities, making mistakes, and picking yourself up and trying again. And it's something that it's funny. It's not specific to the startup world or entrepreneurship, because it's something that Jean echoed, it's something that you've echoed, and lots of other people. So
Fail fast. Fail often, but fail fast.
Fail often and fail fast. That's right. I think Facebook's is move fast and break things. So it's all within the same realm. And you know, when we were speaking, you really mentioned that it was at this time that you really got the bug, so to speak, for driving transformational change at a company. And, you know, I mean, technically what you were saying to me is I really like the jobs that are super hard, that are really stressful, that are like just going to be a real mess. And so why did you lead yourself down the path of deciding like, yeah, those really difficult things, that's exactly what I want to be
That's what I want to do.
all the time. Yeah.
Well, look, I'm one of 6 kids, so when you live and grow up in a family of 6 people, there's a lot of chaos and making order out of chaos. So I will say some of it does come from the roots of being in a big family and taking on a variety of things in that regard. So I like the challenge, but I'm driven by the fact that when you're in an organization, whatever organization you're with, I go back to the starting point, which is, if you don't feel passionate about it, if it isn't something that you're really excited about, then it's just a job. I have been fortunate in that the organizations I've worked with and for have always been things that I have personally felt very passionate about. And there's a real range of them, as you can see. So when you get engaged in an organization that you feel strongly about the mission of what they're trying to do, then embracing that change and trying to make it a better place and trying to disrupt it rather than waiting for it to be disrupted is something that I was just curious about and drawn to. I like to learn. It's a big part of my value set. I'm very curious about what can you do differently and move an organization forward. So when you just tap into that in small and in big ways, that's really fundamentally what change is about. It's about changing a culture of an organization, changing the way people think. It's about taking them to a bigger vision of what they think they can be. And did that in an organization like Plan, where it was a very traditional organization, how people saw it. Did it in Mount Sinai, did it in the Board of Trade in a variety of ways. But had the comfort and the courage to take on some pretty tough decisions when you do that. You have to have the fortitude to take on what goes with change.
Well, we'll definitely cover some of those decisions as we kind of keep going. But something that's pretty interesting is how you were taking on all of these big transformational jobs while also being a mom and having young kids. So how do you kind of make those decisions from a personal and professional standpoint? And one of the things that was really interesting to me that you mentioned was that even though you were taking on these really difficult transformational roles that were stressful and all the rest of it, that your happiness in your job translated to happiness in the family despite that. So if you could just give a little color around that, that'd be really great.
So I think early in our careers, decisions are me decisions, right? They're an individual decision, male or female, right? And I decide what I think I want to do in terms of what type of roles, what companies, where I want to go. But those me decisions become we decisions at some point if you choose to have a partner in your life, and then it's a whole different set of dynamic in terms of how you take those we decisions versus the me decisions. My decision to move to the organization Foster Parents Plan, or Plan Canada now, was as I said, at a time when I was expecting my daughter, my first child. So it was more of a we decision, but I wasn't compromising on some of my values and some of my goals in terms of what drove me to feel the success and the achievement that I wanted in my life and my career. But balancing isn't, it isn't an easy thing. It's very individualistic to each particular family unit. And so I talk to a lot of women about it in terms of how do you find the infamous balance. There is no infamous balance. That's a bunch of BS. You flow in and out of balance. Some days and some weeks and some months you're in balance, and if you're not in balance, your kids will tell you pretty quickly. I shared a couple of stories of how my kids told me. My son told me one night when I'd come home from a trip to Africa and hadn't been there long and was feeling the pressure of getting ready for a board meeting, and I'm sitting telling him a story, and I think he's probably about 6 at this time, and he looks up at me and says to me, "Mom, I'm not a file to be organized." So clearly, I was just a little too efficient in my storytelling that night, and I was a little out of balance, and it just right back at me, shot me in the face, and so you adjust. So you find your ways to adjust. But at the same time, when I would be away from home for weeks, doing things that I felt really passionate about, creating opportunities in communities around the world that don't have all of the things that we take for granted day to day. And I credit the fact that my designation gave me the skills and the know-how to be able to step into that world. That's pretty amazing. But at the same time, I had 2 young children at home. So, some people say, well, is that the right thing to do? How do you balance it? The upside of it, as we talked, was the fact that my children have a very different worldview, and that started at a very young age, because I would come back from these trips and talk to them about being in Sierra Leone, or talk to them what it's like to be in Honduras after Hurricane Mitch, talk to them about what it's like to be in Kosovo. And so I parented differently. I'm a different leader as a result of it. When you are in those challenges, nothing is insurmountable, not even amalgamating 3 designations into one. That's a piece of cake
we'll get to that.
Compared to this. But my kids, came to experience international development, and I think therefore have a bigger view of the world and are very kind of social justice oriented. So when my kids saw me happy, they were happy.
Yeah, well, and it's certainly the case that, when you're not happy, that travels throughout the people that are close to you. And so it makes a whole lot of sense. And
you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. All the parents in the room will know that one.
I am not there yet, but...
oh, you will be, Michael. Just remember that.
Yeah. Well, I'll watch this video in a couple of years. One thing that I just want to immediately point out is like, okay, who goes like, I want to be a CPA because I'm going to travel to Honduras after a hurricane? Probably not that many people, but this is why we love these stories. So when you look at your career from kind of a 30,000-foot lens, you taking on these change or the change that's required in these organizations. Some of them you were there for a really long time. You were, I think, over a decade at Plan, and then just 2 years at Mount Sinai. Can you contrast those experiences and tell us a little about how they differed?
Yeah. So when you're taking on the change role, right? A lot of the change will stick to you. You become the lightning rod, like it or not. And I love change. I love the opportunity to see another vision for an organization, to take it to the next level, to leave it better than when I found it, to bring a lot of people along, because nobody does anything on their own. No leader does. And then kind of move into what that next piece is. But depending on how fast change goes, it can stick to you a lot more, and it's a very bumpy ride. You just have to be up for that. You kind of have to take it on the chin a few times, and there are very different experiences, though, when you try to expedite change in an organization and move it extremely quickly than it is compared to an organization like Plan, where we had a foundation. It was a strong organization. We introduced new offerings into the market. We were changing the name. We were building on the foundations of what it was about. We were trying to move it to be more project-oriented and project sponsorship rather than individual child. So the benefit of staying and sticking through that and being a part of seeing the fruits of your labor, so to speak, is something that's very, very rewarding. To watch the team, to watch people that you've brought in and see them kind of flourish and take on, their roles and grow their leadership is very, very rewarding, as a leader and with an organization. But when you go in, as the case I did in Sinai, and we move change very quickly in that organization, then sometimes it's right for you, and you need to be comfortable as a change leader to say, that's my role. I need to come in, I need to change it, and then I need to leave and let somebody else settle it out and take it to the next level. There's no right or wrong. They're 2 very different styles of doing it. I've had the opportunity to do both.
Well, which do you like better?
I like sticking it out for a little bit. Not for the lifer one, because I think you got to let somebody else take it to the next level. But it is kind of nice to come in and stay with your team and work with your team forward for a bit.
Well, that's good to know for us, because we're going to keep you around for a little bit then. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I'll see.
That's up to these guys, but got my vote. So, I mean, that's it's something that I can actually relate to in a certain sense, that I went into consulting, and the most frustrating part for me was always like, really getting emotionally attached to these big plans that you've made, and then being like, okay, see you later. So I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have had that experience as well, and it can be a little heartbreaking. So yeah, thank you for that. We're actually we're going to take this moment, because I think we're about halfway through now, to try another new thing. I did get the inspiration from the founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman's podcast. I'm going to call it a lightning round. We've got 5 quick questions that you're essentially supposed to shoot from the hip on, like one word or one phrase answers, really quick, and we'll see if we can break up the event a little bit in that way. So, ready?
We'll see.
Okay. Dog or cat person?
Oh, that's tough. No, dog.
Dog. Fair. I'm
My daughter won't like that, but
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Well, you just made a lot of enemies here today.
Okay, sorry.
Cilantro, love it or hate it? This is very important.
I'm not sure about that one. Maybe more on the hate it.
Oh, geez. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna
Not
talk.
winning.
We're gonna talk later.
Okay.
When you go for a snack late at night, is it sweet or salty?
Sweet.
Okay, good. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Okay.
And last question: what's something you read every day?
I read my kids' text every day, because that's probably the only way they communicate with me. So I do.
That was really unexpected. I like that answer.
Well, I do. I have a million things that I have to read, a million things I'd like to read, but the one thing I must read is text from my kids. So that's probably that's the top of the list. And I'm a bit of a philosophy junkie, so I like to read a little bit every night to just kind of put my head in a different space.
So let's jump back in. And by the way, all of you can let me know whether this was like a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the lightning round.
I'd like to ask them the same question.
About the lightning round or about the dogs?
The lightning round. Dog or cat? Dog?
There's some.
Then who's into this whole cat thing? Because it's everywhere. Somebody's making an awful lot of money on it, and there's no cat lovers in the room. Yeah. There we go. There's one.
A couple of hands
okay,
up.
cilantro. Ask that one.
Yeah, cilantro. Come on. Oh. Okay.
Okay.
All you guys, I don't know what's going on. All right. This is.
Do I get like $100 for each one that I got right?
That you get right on majority. Maybe we should get one of those like real-time voting things. We can put it up on screen. That would be really cool. Next time when we give a little bit of a bigger budget. So we'll jump back into the regular scheduled programming. 2007, you became the CEO of the Toronto Regional Board of Trade. Now, this is a pretty old, established organization, and you came in there to shake a couple of things up, and there's a whole lot that you did there, and we won't have time, unfortunately, to hit everything. But the big priorities that, as I understood them, were improving our regional transit infrastructure, which is something that's really near and dear to my heart as well. Thank you for that. And our regional economic competitiveness as it relates to other kind of major metropolitan areas in North America, at least. So I want to just single out a few stories that I thought were particularly interesting and definitely highlight some of that kind of, whether you want to say taking it on the chin or the integrity, that whole aspect of it, because these were pretty public and interesting things that some people here might remember. So you got put in the limelight at one point for taking on our illustrious Mayor Rob Ford at a certain time. So I was, I would be remiss if I didn't ask that. Can you tell us what, like, forget the politics and the sensationalism of, what was going on, but what happened and what did you take away from that experience being in such a public eye at that point?
So I will say very quickly first, back to my head and heart, taking that role on, from my head, it was learning the whole world of policy and politics and personalities, and well, I certainly learned that. But the heart decision was I had been at Plan and I had traveled the world and I'd been to so many cities and communities in the world that just didn't have the opportunities that we had here in Toronto. And I love the city. You know, this is my home city. I grew up here. It's fantastic. And so the opportunity to go in and work in an organization and actually move the dial a tiny bit for the city was something that spoke, again, very personally to me and drove a lot of my actions. So, you know, Mayor Ford, it's actually a very sad story because we all know the ending of what happened to the individual. And you know, I'd met him, I've met his brother, I've met his mother, and I've met his children. You know, he has 2 young children now that have to grow up with an extended family. But the decision there, and I think people know the history of what went on. And,
they may not actually, so maybe
okay.
give them a quick
summary.
summary.
So a little bit about, you know, Mayor Ford. He was a big, boisterous personality, and you know, was very much about a retail politics and very much kind of about the man on the street. And, you know, we see that expressed in a variety of ways in the geopolitical environment now. And I think, you know, he was perhaps a lightning rod at the beginning of some of that. But he was effectively is the CEO for the city of Toronto. You know, that's the way you look at it. He should be our chief cheerleader, our chief marketing officer, our chief everything to position, you know, our great city out there. So the news stories started to come out around his drug addictions or alleged drug addictions, his alleged drinking issues. And if you go back in that point in time, you'll see how it started to escalate over a period of time and became, you know, really quite public, and the media, you know, followed him 24/7 to try to tell that story. So I think probably most people remember that. There was a lot of pressure mounting in the business community because I go back to the fact that this is the individual who was running what I will say is $11 billion business called the City of Toronto, and he's effectively the CEO for that. So it was a decision that we took to say that we needed to speak out. If you, I'll liken it to either a private company or to a public company, and if either one of those are not performing the way they should perform in the sense that their CEO is very distracted and can't take on the roles that are required of the CEO, then it wouldn't be unusual for a board of directors to say, please, you know, we want you to go away and take care of yourself and step aside from that role. And you've seen boards do that in public or private companies, but you just haven't seen it applied in this kind of a context. So that was really, for us, that was what was in our thought process, but it was a very difficult leadership moment. It was a difficult decision because I knew no matter what we did, it would stick to me, it would stick to my personal brand. And obviously it has. Here we are talking about it how many years later. And it would stick to the organization, to Board of Trade. But we felt at that point in time that it was important to speak out. And it was about Ford the mayor, not about Ford the man. It was not about passing judgment on him. It was not about creating publicity. And we had taken the decision that once we were putting a press release out, we would not do any media. It was about saying that this is a situation that someone can't act in the best interest for the city, so we do need to ask you to step aside and allow someone else to come in and move our city forward. And so, so it was a considered decision that I took with some of my team. I still remember the very early morning where we went in, we sat down, it had reached a tipping point, the detail doesn't matter, but you just, you know, and I think that's part of the moral compass of a CPA and the integrity of a CPA and the ethical fortitude of a CPA and your duty of care and doing the right thing. And those are all the things that are in your mind day to day and big and small decisions that are in front of you. And they were very much a driver for me in trying to take this decision. And so we wrote our press release. I called my chair of the board, who was a CPA at the time, and said, here's what we're doing. You know, showed her the press release. She was very supportive, and we put it out there. And within 20 seconds, we were all over CP24. You know, Board of Trade CEO calls for Mayor Rob Ford to step down. And the story unfolded from that. And we know the tragic ending for the individual, but what I think it did do is it released a pressure valve that was felt in the business community, that there was a need for this to happen. And I had so many CEOs, many of whom you would know, come up to me and say, thank you, you know, thank you for just doing the right thing. And that's fundamentally what I think a CPA is all about, doing the right thing.
No, that's great, and I think that it's certainly an instructive story for a lot of us who we're just, all of us in our jobs are constantly put up against difficult decisions, and going with what you think is right, regardless of the fallout or regardless of what might happen, that's something that a lot of people don't do. So, I took a lot out of hearing that the first time and being like, wow, this lady's got something here. This is awesome.
I do, and less about the story, but I think it's the hallmark of who we are, right? It is, and I hope you have your own examples of what that's like in your day-to-day life. I will say both personally and professionally, that, about doing the right thing, having the courage to confront sometimes difficult decisions or to ask difficult questions. And I will say increasingly in today's, back to this disruptive-driven environment, to a geopolitical environment, to a lot of social, to a whole bunch of other issues that are out there, to the pressures, if you're in industry, when you talk about non-GAAP reporting and the pressures that are on, if you're a CFO. So there's a whole bunch of different dynamics in which that doing the right thing and having the courage and the fortitude is going to face you and face us. And that happens to be one particular instance in a very public way that I was faced with it in part of my career.
Well, and from everything that I could tell, you're actually no stranger to these types of situations. You also took on Hurricane Hazel McCallion and anybody that doesn't remember, this is the former mayor of Mississauga who was there for over 35 years and who, well into her 90s actually, and she's called the Hurricane for a pretty self-explanatory reason. And you also took her on in a somewhat public way. And so I kind of just want to say, what does it mean to be a leader in the face of such staunch opposition from pretty iconic political figures, at least here locally?
Speaking truth to power is not, it's not an easy thing to do. I've done it a few times in my career, select those moments. As long as I know I'm doing the right thing for the right reason, for the right organization, or for the right group of people, with the support around me, and that isn't always everybody supporting, then I can put my head on the pillow at night and say, I'm okay. I'm okay with my decision. There might be fallout to it, and I've had my fair share of fallout. I spoke truth to power in a city council meeting and got denatoed a week later, and I thought, oh, did I make a mistake? And then I said, no, actually I didn't make a mistake. I needed, it shook my confidence a bit. So it can shake your confidence sometimes, but you go back to, you have to have kind of the courage to do that. I'm not sure taking on Mayor Hazel McCallion, who's about 4'0" and 90-something. That's like taking on your grandmother, right? You just don't do that. And she was screaming at me through the phone. And
well,
anyway,
we're lucky to have somebody at the head of our organization that does do those things, because I think that's really important. And one of the things that I think everybody here is already getting a good sense of is how you bring a real sense of authenticity to what you do, and it's really nice to see that. It in my experience at least, it just leads to a whole lot more trust that you're gonna say what needs to be said, whether it is popular or not. And I think that that's really important in a leader, and regardless of how that affects you personally in your own kind of future.
My colleagues on the board will tell you that. Not always popular.
Well,
but,
and it's good that you sit here now, years later, looking back on that and being able to be proud of what you did. And that's something that I think all of us wish we could do with every part of our lives. And maybe that
do it in a professional way, and do it with compassion. And I will say in both those instances, I do feel that they were done that way for the right reasons. So
no, that's great.
I can live with that.
Well, look, we're going to spend just whatever time we have left on your role as CEO of CPA Ontario. I mean, the first thing that I have to ask is, we all know what the situation was like in 2014 when you started your job, and that was a hurricane, for lack of a better word.
Oh yeah, that was a hurricane.
What attracted you to such a challenging role? Well,
I'll go back to my opening comment, which it was a deeply personal deeply personal decision for me to take on this role. And I credit all the opportunities I've had. You know, I'm one of 6 kids. I didn't come from a family that had an awful lot. I found my way to the CPA. It gave me a lot of opportunity. Yes, I worked really hard. But I credit a lot of the opportunities I've had in my life, that my children have had, the people that I've met, the things I've done, to this profession and to this designation. So when they came knocking on my door, for me, this was an opportunity at a transformative time for our profession to actually come and you know, be a part of putting my fingerprints, along with a lot of other people, putting their fingerprints on the path forward. So that was the personal, passionate kind of side of the decision. The professional side was, while I've taken organizations through a lot of change, I hadn't, you know, done a merger of 3 organizations into one. And I naively thought, wow, that's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be great.
It's a pretty rare situation, to say the least.
It's rare, all right.
Yeah.
What I will say is that, you know, doing a merger of 3 equals is not the same as doing an acquisition, where you take one company, you shove it in the other, and these are our systems, and this is the way it works. This is our culture, and this is the way it works. And if you don't like it, get out. That's not what we were doing as a profession, right? We had 3 different legacy bodies, probably represented in this room, incredibly proud of their designation, incredibly proud of their legacy, and rightly so. And it was important that all of that was going to find its way forward. Culturally, you know, it needed to find its way forward. And I would say, you know, yeah, it's been very bumpy. I think we're now getting smoother on that. We still have some challenges, and you may tell us about some of those. But amalgamating 3 companies into one, and creating a new brand and a new vision was just a huge professional challenge that I thought would be a lot of fun with a lot of great people.
Yeah, well, and the stakeholders are different than a regular company, where it's just financial kind of incentives involved there. When it's a designation like this, we all have a lot of ourselves personally invested in it, so that does change it. And I kind of want to ask you, you know, what do you want people to think? Let's look down the road. What do you want people to think when they hear the letters CPA?
Well, I'm going to give you a little shout out here. I love what you guys are doing. I think you are, you know, you're the essence of just kind of bucking the traditional brand of what an accountant's been all about. It is, and so do more of it, right? You're bold, be bold. I think, you know, I think accounting is the language of business, and we are business leaders, and so that's what I think, you know, I want people to think about. We want people to think about in terms of when you think about accountants. And so, as much as I'm fine with the word accountant, professional accountant, I actually like to talk more about being a leader, a business leader, in a whole variety of different ways. And so if you've seen some of our recent branding campaign that's out there, whether you've seen the, you know, the ad in terms of Ask a CPA, right, and the CDs, and how's that going to help us sell more CDs, or whether you see some of the questions, that's really what we're trying to say, is look at the breadth and the depth of the variety of challenges that are in front of you, and ask your CPA, because they're inside. They can help you navigate those decisions. They can help you build a better business, and so that's just who we are, right? But I will say, still come very much up against the tradition of, no matter what your legacy was, the traditional view of what, that narrow view of what an accountant is. I still think we have a way to go, and I can tell you that in the conversations that I've had. So we need to push pretty boldly in order to change that perception.
Yeah, well, and, you know, it's funny because it's something that we actually struggle with a lot with our own marketing content. Is we don't like to use the word accountant, because not all CPAs view themselves as an accountant. They know accounting, but that's kind of a different thing. And then it gets really messy when you start talking about, like, people who are designated in other countries, because the, you know, designated accounting professional doesn't have quite the ring to it that that we would like to have. But nonetheless, you know, and I know this is kind of cliche, and we've sort of touched on how, you know, how rapidly things are changing. But can you give us a sense of anything, and maybe this will be a starting point for some of the questions as well, for what are your overall, like, kind of strategic plans around how we're going to maintain a designation that's relevant, that's valued, that's respected in the business community as time goes on?
So there's no doubt that we are as ripe for disruption as any other profession or any particular business, and you know what I mean when I say that by the fact of machine learning, artificial intelligence, however you like to label it. And so many say that will take out, you know, kind of huge segments of our profession and completely make a whole bunch of roles, you know, very, very redundant. And there's probably a certain amount of truth to that. There is a certain amount of some of the traditional aspects of what accountants have done that don't need to be done, that will be replaced by artificial intelligence type technology that's out there. But what I do think is interesting is the fact that, you know, we talk a lot about data analytics, master of data analytics, big data, call it whatever you want, data scientists that are out there. I think the roots of that are actually very much a part of our profession. Quite honestly, though, I don't think we're moving fast enough as a profession to claim that ground. I think we're letting some others take that ground away from us. I don't know why. I could speculate on a variety of reasons why, but I think that's our space to claim, and I think we need to be a lot bolder and move a lot faster on that front, and marry that up with the upside of AI, which is that as prediction, because AI is basically, right, just prediction analytics, right, or, you know, prediction, and as the cost of prediction, as AI comes in more and the cost of prediction goes down, right, then the value of other things will go down and the value of other things will go up. So the value of judgment will go up. The value of decision making will go up, which means the value of a CPA in terms of their skills will really go up in that kind of a situation. Perhaps there will be less of us. I don't know what the numerics will be. But the value of our insight and critical thinking and our ability to help people take those decisions is going to have a much more of a premium in that world. But we need to bring the data science piece along with us and not, you know, let that part of our history just fall away to something else. So I think we've got to learn how to marry those two and reposition. That's a part of repositioning the brand and the value proposition of a CPA.
Well, that's actually great, because, you know, it's something that I think a lot of us as CPAs don't actually realize is how good we are with numbers. I'm constantly in situations where people actually think I'm really good with Excel, which I'm not, probably in this group, but somebody who doesn't have an accounting background looks at me and they're like, oh my God, look at you. And it's like, I'm really not very good with Excel, I promise. And, you know, there's a level of comfortability that we have, a level of familiarity that we have with numbers, with quantitative analysis, that the majority of people don't, and I think that that's a really interesting angle to take, that we could and should own data science, because it's where we come from. So
yeah, it's a part of, all right, of who we are. Your ability to read the financials or to look at the data and to extract from it, you know, what does it mean for whatever particular business you're working in or what industry, is just at the core of what we've done. It just gets done in a very different way now. So.
Great. So I will ask one more question, and then we'll get on to questions from the audience, because we are running out of time. But I had the either pleasure or pain of going to the annual general meeting of the CPAO last year, and I just have to ask, what is it like to have to go up and defend your financial statements to a whole group of accountants?
Oh, it's a real blast, Michael. It's great. For all of you, come to our AGM next year. Look, I expect them to ask the questions. I expect you to ask the questions that we do get asked some interesting questions, and I don't have a problem with it. You know, are some of them a bit surprising? Sure, but more importantly, you know, these are people that feel strongly about the profession. So when anybody's engaged in our profession, I'm happy to answer any question that you want to ask of me, and we're very transparent, you know, and I'm very transparent, and so I don't have a problem with that one. It's kind of fun at times, entertaining at other moments, but
it was entertaining for me.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I can tell.
Sitting at the back, it was great.
Which was the particular question that you really enjoyed watching me squirm on?
Oh, you know what? I think it had to do with obviously with revenue. Something there was some, you know, it was a while ago now, but I'm going to go next year and actually write it down, because there were some fun ones. No, you know what? We really appreciate you taking the time here today. I think people in the audience have a couple of questions that they're going to want to have you. I mean, please try to keep it just concise enough that she can handle it in a short period of time. There's lots of big questions, I'm sure, and hopefully Carol will stick around afterwards to chat with any other people that are interested. But one of the things that really strikes me, the more I get to know Carol, is how candid she is, how just honest she is, and that's just the best thing from any leader, especially one that has like a public mandate like ours. So we'll save the applause maybe until after the questions. But yeah, let's see who wants to come up to bat. All right.
Hi there, Carol.
How are you?
We talked earlier.
Yes.
I have a question. What do you feel CPA Ontario's role is in terms of providing guidance on public issues, for example, the new tax proposals and other things that are economic or have financial impacts on society?
Well, I think we play multiple roles, but what I think you're really referring to is the thought leadership role that I think that we can play. There's both an advocacy and a thought leadership role, and sometimes they cross over, right? And so areas of public policy that are out there, I think that's something that we haven't traditionally commented on as a profession, and I think we do have a role, but I think we also have a responsibility to play more of a thought leadership role and more of an advocate role. And so that is something we didn't really get into, but when you talk about the future, we've just had this discussion quite literally at our board table in the last couple of months. We've laid out a framework for thought leadership for the profession, so you will see us out there more actively engaging you and your points of view, and we probably won't agree all the time because we're 90,000 in Ontario, but we should be putting our voice, and we should be creating public dialogue. It isn't about one particular point of view. Sometimes it's just about creating a public dialogue on particular issues. So stay tuned, because I think you're going to start to see us become much more active, and I'd like to say pretty bold and provocative.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I think we have time for one more. So.
Well, thank you for answering that as well. Just to kind of add on to the point, I do agree with you that the industry might be changing, but CPAs, in terms of playing a role within cryptocurrencies and blockchain, this is a new area. And what I find is that, like you said, it's very encouraging that we're trying to catch up in terms of with the data scientists. But what are you doing now with the kind of the next set of changes, where the way money is handled, the way money is tracked? That's something that, from a CPA profession, we can get ahead of it. What's some strategy you have there?
Well, I was going to say, somebody was to page you to ask that question. Vic, my chief of staff over there, I think he gave you $20. Back to the thought leadership. That is one of the topics that we are looking quite seriously at right now. And just the whole idea of cryptocurrencies and a distributed ledger and how to get your arms around it and how do you know it's complete and all of that. So it's a ripe conversation for us. We are looking at most likely putting some kind of discussion paper out there to seed the conversation again, to get the right dialogue going, not to take a point of view at this point in time, but to get in front of it. So I will say it's not public facing, and we will be reaching out to a variety of our members, because there's lots of expertise and lots of points of view in our membership around that. But we should be, back to who we are, we should be out there in front of that conversation, seeding it, getting the dialogue going. It's a big part of who we should be in the future. So that's another one to stay tuned.
Great, yeah, and I wish we had more time, but again, hopefully some of the Carol and some of the other people from CPA Ontario that are here will be able to stick around and have some of these discussions on blockchain specifically and crypto. It's actually an area that has come up a couple of times at our events. It's probably something that we'll want to tackle at some point, maybe putting together a panel or something like that, so maybe we can have somebody from CPA Ontario join that as well. But thank you for all the wonderful questions, and most importantly, thank you, Carol. If we could get just a quick round of applause, thank you. It's been really wonderful having you here, and I think the fact that you want to come out, you want to have these discussions, that's what leadership is. That's what our designation needs, and yeah, we can't thank you enough, and we do want to offer you a small token, including a Luminari shirt.
That's what I really wanted, was the T-shirt.
The rest of the board members, stay tuned. Yours are coming shortly.
Thank you very much. It's a great opportunity. I'd love to chat if a couple people want to hang around a little bit. But let me also just thank you for this opportunity and for your leadership, both what you're doing as an entrepreneur, but what you're doing for the profession, because you really are telling the story of the future where the profession's going. So please keep doing it.
Appreciate that. And I guess... Oh. I will take this opportunity just before I let all of you go. I don't know where I'm at with time, but I think we're nearing, if not at an hour. I'm getting this one. So just before we end, a really special milestone. In 9 days, Luminari will have been live for 1 full year. We made it. And it's thanks in large part to the people here today. Some quick kind of milestones for us. At this point, depending on how you slice it, I'm not going to get into the details with all the accountants here, we have in between 20 and 25% of all the CPAs in the GTA that are on Luminari. So that's really exciting. We've placed over 75 people at various companies, a lot of whom are actually here today, which is really cool to see. More than that, we've placed people in volunteer positions in a couple of places. We have a really cool startup program if any CPA wants to get involved in helping out young startups that can really use your help on a volunteer basis to help push our innovation economy forward. And we also released this new news platform that we called BizFeed, which is essentially a really easy, quick way to get cool news on things that accountants will find interesting that isn't just accounting, because we know that accountants want more than just accounting. And the last thing that I want to say on that is, after a really long time of talking to a lot of CPAs, we have constantly been, I guess, not surprised at all at the endless curiosity that CPAs have about how businesses run. And we are no exception to that. So the most common question I ever get asked is, how do we make money? And we make money by charging companies to post jobs and hire all of you. So that's our goal. We are not a recruitment agency. We don't take a commission on anything we do. We don't do any of that stuff. And the reason that we set it up that way is so that we can be more transparent, because we don't have a commission that we're trying to protect, and so that we don't have any incentive to actually put people in jobs that aren't the right fit. Our goal is to actually make this entire market a little more efficient so that all of you can find the opportunities that you want at the right time, at the right place. So I implore all of you, wherever you can and wherever you go, please help us spread the word. We really do need your help. Tell your companies when they're looking to hire. Tell your friends' companies when they're looking to hire. Tell your CPA friends just to sign up, even if they're not looking for a job, because that's what Luminari is built to do. So thank you very much. We hope that you enjoyed tonight. Yeah, stay tuned. We've got a really, really cool lineup of people next for 2018. So look forward to that. And I hope you had a great evening.